Hey, listener, ever feel like economics is kind of this big mysterious machine with all these levers and dials that nobody really knows how to use?
Yeah.
Well, today we're cracking open the control panel. We're taking a deep dive into economics for managers.
Absolutely.
No boring lectures, no confusing jargon,
Right.
just clear, insightful explanations that you can actually apply to your business decisions.
Exactly. We're gonna break down a whole course syllabus
Yeah.
covering both micro and macroeconomics and show you how these concepts play out in the real world, especially in a dynamic economy like Nepal's.
Think of it as your crash course in economic thinking for savvy decision makers.
Right.
And who knows, maybe by the end of this deep dive, you'll be the one explaining economics to everyone else.
Well, it all starts with understanding some pretty basic principles,
Okay.
but they have surprisingly powerful implications for businesses of all sizes. We're talking about scarcity, opportunity cost, and trade-offs.
Okay, let's start with scarcity. I think we all get that resources are limited, right?
Yeah.
Time, money, raw materials, you name it. But how does that translate to making better business decisions?
Well, think of it this way. Every choice you make as a manager means you're saying no to other potential choices.
Okay.
That's the essence of opportunity cost, the value of the next best alternative that you're giving up.
So it's not just about the direct costs of a decision, but also the potential benefits you miss out on
Right.
by choosing one path over another.
Precisely. Let's say you're a manager in a Nepalese textile company,
Okay.
and you're deciding whether to invest in new weaving equipment or hire more workers.
Mm.
The opportunity cost of buying that equipment might be the potential gains
Yeah.
from expanding your workforce and increasing your production capacity.
So even if the new equipment looks like a good investment on paper,
Yeah.
you have to consider what else you could be doing with those resources and whether that might generate even higher returns.
Exactly. And that brings us to the idea of economic profit, which takes into account those opportunity costs. It's not just about calculating revenue minus expenses.
Right.
It's about understanding the true cost of your decisions.
So a business might look profitable on the surface, but if they could have made even more money by pursuing a different strategy,
Right.
their economic profit is actually lower.
Right. It's a way of evaluating your decisions in a broader context and ensuring you're truly maximizing value in the long run.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork with scarcity, opportunity cost, and economic profit. What's the next layer of the economic foundation we need to understand?
Now let's dive into the forces that drive every market,
Yeah.
supply and demand.
Okay.
It might seem like Economics 101, but trust me, understanding how these forces interact is crucial.
Right.
For any business, especially in a diverse and rapidly evolving market like Nepal's.
Okay, but let's break it down in a way that makes sense for busy managers. We're talking about things like consumer behavior and how much people are willing to pay for a product or service.
Exactly. And one key concept here is utility.
Okay.
Now, we're not talking about your electricity bill.
Right.
In economics, utility refers to the satisfaction or benefit a consumer gets from using a product or service.
So if someone is really craving a cup of masala chai, that first sip is going to have a high level of utility
Right.
because it satisfies a strong desire.
Yes.
But as they drink more chai, the utility each additional cup might decrease.
That's a great example. And understanding this principle of diminishing marginal utility
Okay.
can help businesses with things like product development, marketing, and pricing strategies.
So a company selling high-quality trekking gear in Nepal might try to highlight the unique features and benefits
Right.
that provide the highest utility to their target customers,
Right.
like durability, comfort, and weather resistance.
Exactly. By understanding what consumers value most, businesses can differentiate themselves from competitors and justify a premium price.
This is starting to make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But how do businesses actually measure this utility
Right.
and figure out how much people are willing to pay? Is there some kind of magic formula?
Well, there's no magic formula,
Okay.
but there are some powerful tools we can use.
Okay.
And one of those tools is the concept of elasticity.
Okay.
It measures how sensitive the demand for a product is to changes in price.
Okay, so if the demand for a product is very elastic, that means even a small increase in price might cause a big drop in sales, right? Like
Right.
if the price of momos suddenly doubled, people might start looking for other snack options.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if demand is inelastic, you might have more flexibility with pricing
Okay.
because people are less sensitive to changes.
Okay.
Think about essential goods like gasoline or medicine.
Yeah.
Even if prices go up, people still need to buy them.
This is starting to feel very strategic. So understanding elasticity is crucial for businesses to make informed decisions about pricing, especially in competitive markets.
You got it. And it's not just about price elasticity. There are other types of elasticity that can be useful for businesses.
Okay.
Income elasticity, for example,
Okay.
tells you how demand changes as consumer incomes rise or fall.
So a luxury car dealership in Nepal might see a big increase in demand as incomes rise,
Right.
while a shop selling basic necessities might experience less fluctuation.
Precisely. And then there's cross elasticity,
Okay.
which looks at how the demand for one product is affected by price changes in a related product.
So if the price of coffee beans goes up, a coffee shop might see a decrease in demand for their lattes. Or if the price of plane tickets to Nepal drops, we might see an increase in demand for trekking gear and tour packages.
Exactly. By understanding these different types of elasticity, businesses can get a much deeper understanding of how consumer behavior is influenced by various factors and make more informed decisions.
This is already making me think about my own business in a whole new way. Okay, so we've covered the foundations of scarcity, opportunity cost, and the dynamics of supply and demand. Where do we go from here on our economics journey?
Next, we'll explore how businesses take those raw ingredients, labor, capital, raw materials, and transform them into the products and services that consumers want. We'll unpack the concept of production functions and see how businesses can optimize their operations for maximum efficiency.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
I'm ready to dive into the nitty-gritty of how businesses actually create value.
Yeah.
Lead the way.
Hey.
Okay, so we've talked about scarcity, opportunity cost, and how supply and demand dance together in the market. But now I'm curious, how do businesses actually take those raw materials, labor, capital, all that stuff, and turn them into actual products and services? Is there like some secret economic recipe they're following?
Well, it's not exactly a secret recipe,
Okay.
but there is a framework that we can use to understand this process. It's called a production function, and it basically shows us the relationship between inputs and outputs.
Okay. So if we're talking about like a bakery in Kathmandu making delicious cell roti, the inputs would be things like flour, sugar, ghee, the baker's time, and skill the ovens, all that.
Yeah.
And the output would be the number of cell roti they can produce.
Exactly. And the production function helps us understand how those inputs combine to create that output. It's like a blueprint for efficiency.
So if the bakery wants to make more cell roti, they could hire another baker, get a bigger oven, or maybe find a way to automate part of the process. The production function would help them figure out like the best way to increase output.
Precisely. And what's really interesting is that production functions often exhibit something called diminishing returns.
Diminishing returns, that sounds a bit ominous. What does that mean?
It's not as scary as it sounds. It simply means that as you keep adding more of a single input while holding other inputs constant forward, the additional output you get from each extra unit starts to decrease.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going back to our cell roti bakery, if they keep hiring more and more bakers without getting bigger ovens or more space, at some point, those extra bakers might not be able to contribute way or waiting around for an available oven.
That's a perfect example. It highlights the importance of finding the right balance of inputs. Too much of one input without the others can lead to diminishing returns and inefficiency.
Okay, so how do businesses find that sweet spot, that perfect mess of inputs to maximize their output? Do they just keep experimenting until they hit the jackpot?
Well, there's a more systematic way to approach this, and it involves a cool tool called iSequence.
ISO what? Now that sounds intimidating.
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Think of iSequence as contour lines on a map, but instead of showing elevation, they show different combinations of inputs that can produce the same level of output.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for our cell roti bakery, an isoquant might show us that they can produce 1,000 cell roti using either 2 bakers and 3 ovens or 3 bakers and 2 ovens.
Exactly. And the shape of the isoquant tells us about the relationship between those inputs. If it's relatively straight, that means the inputs are easily substitutable. You can trade one for the other without much impact on output. But if it's more curved, that means the inputs are more complementary. You need the right balance of both to achieve maximum efficiency.
So isoquants can help businesses visualize different production possibilities and kind of find the most cost-effective way to achieve their desired output.
Exactly. And this is especially relevant in a diverse economy like Nepal's, where businesses have access to a range of inputs with varying costs. They can use isoquants to optimize their production processes based on the relative prices of labor capital and raw materials.
This is really making me think about all the strategic decisions that businesses have to make behind the scenes. Okay, so We figured out how to produce efficiently, but now we got to sell all this stuff.
Mhm.
What happens when our goods and services hit the market?
Well, that depends on the kind of market we're dealing with. And that brings us to the fascinating world of market structures, which essentially describes the competitive landscape in which businesses operate.
Okay, so what kind of market structures are we talking about? Is it like a sliding scale from totally chill to cutthroat competition?
You could think of it that way. At one end of the spectrum, we have perfect competition, where there are many small firms selling identical products, making it easy for new businesses to enter the market.
Mhm.
It's like a bustling local market in Nepal with tons of vendors selling similar produce.
So in a perfectly competitive market, no single firm has much control over the price, right? It's all about supply and demand driving the market.
Exactly. And because there's so much competition, firms have to focus on being as efficient as possible to keep their costs down and stay profitable.
Makes sense. So what about the other end of the spectrum, the cutthroat competition zone?
That would be a monopoly where there's only one firm controlling the entire market for a particular product or service. Think about utilities like electricity or water supply in Nepal. Often there's only one provider.
Right.
Yeah.
So monopolies have a lot of power to set prices and control output, right? Because consumers don't have any other options.
That's right. Monopolies can be good or bad depending on how they use their power. Sometimes they can lead to higher prices and less innovation because there's no competition to drive improvement. But in some cases, monopolies might be necessary to provide essential services efficiently, like a nationwide power grid.
Okay, so we've got perfect competition and monopolies, but I'm guessing there's some middle ground, right?
Yeah.
Not everything is black and white in the real world.
You're absolutely right. There are a couple of interesting market structures in between those two extremes. One is monopolistic competition, where there are many firms selling differentiated products.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of everyone selling identical cell rotis, each bakery might have its own special recipe or unique flavors. They're competing, but they're also offering something unique to attract customers.
Precisely. Think about the vibrant restaurant scene in Kathmandu. There are tons of options, but each restaurant tries to create its own unique ambiance menu and dining experience to stand out from the crowd.
That makes sense. What about the other middle ground market structure?
That would be an oligopoly where a few large firms dominate the market. Think about the telecom industry in Nepal, where you have a handful of major players controlling most of the market share.
So in an oligopoly, those big players have to be very strategic about their pricing, marketing, and product development because they're constantly trying to one-up each other.
Exactly. And this is where things can get really interesting with businesses making calculated moves and counter moves, anticipating their competitors' action. And in fact, there's a whole field of economics dedicated to analyzing these strategic interactions between firms called game theory.
Game theory sounds intriguing. I'm already imagining myself using these economic concepts to outmaneuver my competitors and become a business mastermind.
Huh?
But before I get too carried away, where do we go from here in our Economics for Managers adventure? We've covered a lot of ground from the micro foundations to the different types of market structures. What's next on the agenda?
Now it's time to zoom out and look at the big picture macroeconomics. We're going to explore how economists measure the health of national economies using Nepal's dynamic economic landscape as our real-world case study. Get ready to see how all these microeconomic concepts we've discussed fit into the larger economic puzzle.
Bring on the big picture. I'm ready to level up my understanding of how economies work on a grand scale. Let's dive in.
All right.
All right, listener, we've journeyed from those micro foundations of scarcity and opportunity cost to the dynamics of supply and demand, production, even dipped our toes into the strategic waters of market structures. Now we're stepping onto the grand stage, macroeconomics. It's time to see how all those intricate pieces we've explored fit into the grand tapestry of national economies.
And what better way to kind of grasp these powerful macro forces than by examining a real-world example? Nepal's vibrant and ever-evolving economy. We'll unravel the methods economists use to gauge a nation's economic well-being, delve into various growth models, and even explore the policy tools governments employ to shape and influence economic outcomes.
But before we get lost in the macro maze, let's start with the basics. How do economists actually measure the health of an economy? I always hear terms like GDP and GNP thrown around,
Right.
but to be honest, I'm not always sure what they really mean.
You're not alone. Those are definitely key indicators,
Yeah.
but let's demystify them. GDP, or gross domestic product, Measures the total value of all the goods and services produced within a country's borders over a specific period, usually a year.
Yeah.
Think of it as a snapshot of the overall size and activity of an economy.
So if Nepal's GDP is growing, that's
Mhm.
generally a good sign,
Yeah.
right? It means the economy is expanding, producing more goods and services, creating jobs, and boosting incomes.
Exactly. A rising GDP typically indicates a healthy and growing economy. GNP, or gross national product, is a bit different. It looks at the total value of goods and services produced by a country's residents, regardless of their location.
Okay.
So this includes things like remittances sent back to Nepal by citizens working abroad.
That makes sense. Remittances are a significant part of Nepal's economy, so it's crucial to factor them in when assessing the country's overall economic performance.
Absolutely. But measuring an economy isn't always a straightforward task. There are challenges, especially in countries like Nepal with a substantial informal sector.
Yeah.
Think about all the small businesses, street vendors, and activities that aren't officially registered or tracked.
Yeah, it's like a hidden economic engine humming along beneath the surface.
Yeah.
All those mom and pop shops, the bustling street markets, the farmers selling their produce directly to consumers.
Right.
How do economists even begin to account for that?
It's tricky, but economists employ various methods to estimate the size and impact of the informal sector.
Okay.
They might use surveys, statistical adjustments, or analyze patterns of consumption and income to get a more complete picture.
So we've got a handle on how to measure economic output. But what about understanding how economies grow and develop over time? What are those driving forces behind economic expansion?
That's where the fascinating world of economic growth models comes in.
Yeah.
Each model offers a unique perspective on what fuels economic growth and how to achieve it.
Okay, lay some economic wisdom on me. What are some of the prominent growth models out there?
One influential model is the Keynesian model, which emphasizes the role of aggregate demand. That's the total spending in an economy.
Right.
It suggests that government intervention through fiscal policy can help stimulate demand and boost growth, especially during economic downturns.
So if Nepal's economy is facing a slowdown, the government could increase spending on infrastructure projects or social programs to inject money into the economy, create jobs, and get things moving again.
Precisely. Then we have the Herod-Domar model, which focuses on the relationship between savings, investment, and economic growth.
Okay.
It highlights the importance of capital accumulation, investing in things like factories, machinery, and infrastructure to drive economic expansion.
That makes sense. If businesses in Nepal have access to more capital, they can expand their operations, increase production, hire more workers, and ultimately contribute to a higher GDP.
Exactly. Another key model is the Solo model, which adds technological progress to the equation. It argues that long-term economic growth isn't just about accumulating capital, but also about innovating, becoming more efficient, and using technology to boost productivity.
So Nepal needs to invest not just in fiscal capital, but also in research and development, education, and technology adoption to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth. It's about working smarter, not just harder.
Precisely. And then there's the exciting endogenous growth theory, which places even greater emphasis on the role of human capital, innovation, and knowledge creation as those driving forces behind long-term economic growth.
So investing in education, fostering a culture of entrepreneurship, and promoting research and development become even more crucial under this model. It's about unlocking the potential of people and ideas to drive progress and prosperity.
You got it. Now, the key is to connect these models to Nepal's specific context. The country faces unique challenges, such as infrastructure bottlenecks, dependence on remittances, and vulnerability to natural disasters.
Right.
But there are also tremendous opportunities, like a young and growing population, abundant natural resources, and a strategic location between two economic giants, India and China.
It's like this complex and dynamic puzzle.
Yeah.
Figuring out which pieces fit best and how to leverage those opportunities while addressing the challenges. This is where government policy comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Governments have a crucial role in shaping that economic landscape.
Absolutely. Governments have powerful tools at their disposal to influence the economy, mainly monetary and fiscal policy. Think of them as the control panel for a nation's economic engine.
Okay, break it down for me. What exactly is the difference between monetary and fiscal policy?
Monetary policy is all about managing the money supply, interest rates, and exchange rates. In Nepal, the central bank, Nepal Rashtra Bank, plays a vital role in controlling inflation, supporting economic growth, and maintaining financial stability.
So if inflation is getting too high, Nepal Rashtra Bank might raise interest rates to encourage saving and discourage borrowing,
Right.
which can help cool down the economy.
Exactly. Fiscal policy, on the other hand, is the government's approach to taxing and spending.
Okay.
It's about making decisions on how to allocate resources, stimulate economic activity, and provide public goods and services.
So the government could decide to invest in infrastructure projects, like building roads or expanding internet access to boost economic growth and create jobs.
Right.
Or they could adjust tax rates to encourage investment in certain sectors or provide relief to struggling industries.
Precisely. And these decisions have ripple effects throughout the economy, influencing business investment, consumer spending, employment, inflation, and ultimately the overall well-being of the nation.
Wow, it's a delicate balancing act, managing all these economic levers and trying to steer the economy in the right direction.
It certainly is, and it's a continuous process of monitoring, adjusting, and responding to ever-changing economic conditions, both domestically and globally.
So listener, there you have it. We've taken you on an incredible journey through economics for managers, from those foundational principles to the grand forces that shape national economies. We've even used Nepal's dynamic economy as a real-world example to bring these concepts to life.
Indeed. And as we've discovered, economics isn't just a dry academic subject. It's a powerful lens for understanding the world around us, from everyday business decisions to the complex interplay of global economic forces.
Exactly. It's about making sense of the forces that shape our lives, our businesses, and the world we live in. So as you go forth, armed with your newfound economic savvy, remember to think critically, ask questions, and never stop learning because the world of economics is always evolving and there's always something new to discover.